Hi, my name's Tom. I'm the artist at Spiral Circus, currently working on the game Silt.
So, Tom, talk about what this game is. What Silt is. It's a very unique, it has a very unique art style, which is appropriate because you're the artist.
Thank you. Well, it's a surreal puzzle game that's set in like a deep, dark abyss. And you play a diver, and the kind of goal is like you manipulate creatures of the ocean to progress throughout the game. So you're a bit of a shady character, I imagine, but I'll leave that up to people's perceptions. But yeah, it's very dark, it's very weird, it's very surreal. It's basically everything that I love artistically is always going to be down that route. So that's kind of why we set it in this kind of world. Very Tim Burton influenced, I imagine.
You talk about some of the other games that influenced you. I mean, I looked at this, I see a lot of like Limbo and other and Journey, like a lot of these very stylistic, simplistic gameplay design. Like it's really just you can't stop looking at it. It looks like a comic book come to life, really, you know?
Wow, well, I mean that's a big compliment. Thank you very much. Like I mean, we're always going to take the compliments of anything that's down the play dead route or anything artistically driven like that is stuff that we're really, really into. So yeah, we're flattered that people can compare it to games like that. I mean, for me, Limbo is actually the reason that I kind of jumped into the games industry in the first place, because I hadn't played games for a long time, and I'd been working in animation and fine art, and seeing a game like Limbo made me realize that like a atmospheric and kind of moody art style could be adapted to this kind of medium. So for me, it was a bit of an eye opener, being like, oh, okay, like that's the type of thing I want to do. That's what I want to make.
If you don't mind me asking, what did you do before you got into video games as an artist? Like you worked in animation, were you storyboard, were you in between, so character design?
I was an environment artist for a bit, but whilst I was doing environment art, I was doing fine art, character design, literally just like drawing made up characters, putting them on Instagram or anywhere on social media. And that kicked off, and I stopped doing environment design and started doing my fine art and character-based work instead, and went down the kind of gallery route with that. And it was great to be able to draw my own work and discover what I wanted to do with all of that. But whilst I was doing it, because I'd studied animation, I realized that what I really wanted to do was have my characters come to life. And it just became a bit of a serendipitous moment when I met my now business partner, who he's an ex-scientist, and he used to work in behavioral science, and he wanted to make games, and I wanted to make my characters move. And we kind of met at the right moment because our partners are best friends, and we just met, and it seemed to kind of form from there. And Silt was born, or our company was born. And so yeah, it all became the right way to go, really.
Are you self-taught? Are you classically trained? Did you go to school for art and animation? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I went to school in Bournemouth. There used to be an arts institute down in Bournemouth, down in the south of England, which was an amazing place to go to study animation. But I did animation production, which was or 2D animation production to be specific, which is like a very, very niche part of the industry. And by the time we graduated, the industry wasn't exactly flourishing. So it was one of those degrees where you're like, oh, right, I don't know how to adapt this to anything. And from there, I fell into doing traditional work, just off my own back, and everything kind of went from there.
It's interesting because I also too worked in animation and in fine art.
Oh, right.
In animation specifically, especially I worked for Warner Brothers Animation, and
great.
Right as it was dying, you know what I mean? Like everyone was going to the 3D route because that's what I guess everyone on the higher up pay scale thinks people want. They don't want traditional 2D anymore. They want big 3D stuff. So it was a really big eye opener. But this interview is not about me. Talk about how did that training and your fine art and your animation how did that help you get into game development? Or was it a simple transition? Do you think it gave you an advantage, or?
I think it gave me like a rough idea about how to at least get my characters moving, but I was, if I'm being honest, I was very green to the process. I loved the idea of it, but I'd never done anything like that before. So it was very experimental couple of years once we started, but it just seemed to fall into place weirdly. Like I definitely feel that like from the art direction side, I could do that. Luckily the technical side was very much covered by Dom, my business partner and technical director. So everything that I can't do technically was on him, and everything visually that he can't do was on me. So it all seemed to work out well with that, which is good.
Yeah, for very small indie teams, I've noticed that's a great match, is the person who's very artistically inclined or musically inclined, and then of course the coding development side of it. And if you can get those two people together, then it's a really good team up, kind of like a Wonder Twins Power Activate thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
So can you talk about like how when you make something and you've like when you make a creature or a fish or a backdrop as an environmentalist, you just hand it off to your partner and then he makes sure he puts it in the game? Is that how the relationship works? Are you guys both learning how to do it together?
Yeah, I mean, we had the first couple of years that we started doing this, a lot of it was very much based on process and like how to make the process like the easiest transition for both of us. Because the way that I normally draw is entirely traditional with, pen on paper. And that is how we started. Like I definitely remember doing like a few watercolor paintings and then just being like handing them to Dom and kind of hoping that traditional style could go through to what we were doing now. But it seemed very from my end, it was very labor intensive. And so what we've done instead is kind of worked out a way of adapting my style to fit this type of process. So it is digitally drawn, but I still crosshatch, which is what I have always done with pen and ink. So I definitely feel that it's an adaptation of my style to come up with what we've come up with. And I'm very happy with how it's all ended up looking, because it's been a tough process trying to make cross-hatching work for games. If anything, what I really wanted to do was not end up cross-hatching an entire game, which is almost what I have done.
What was your decision to go completely black and white with the visual art style? What went into that process?
I've always drawn in black and white, and don't know if I've got a good reason for that, apart from just I love the aesthetic. And after uni, I just started drawing black and white characters and never stopped. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that it was something that I could explore. And there's a lot, in monochrome work, that you can get a lot of mood, a lot of atmosphere, and color has never really come into it. We might go down the color route one day, but to me, the whole Lynchian atmosphere, that type of route is much where is where I want to be at the moment, for sure.
Yeah, it is interesting how much you can get out of black and white, just the amount of shades in between the two. If you look at the gradient, then you're just like, wow, that's a lot of colors. It's not as limiting as people think, or as a normal person would think.
Yeah, definitely. If anything, it's I've always been really obsessed with lighting. I love atmospheric lighting, and for me, the dream is to be able to have my characters move in a game situation with atmospheric lighting behind it, and that's kind of hopefully what we've achieved or are achieving, which is a very nice feeling.
Yeah, and a lot of your environment art has the perspective of the multiple layers on top of each other to give the illusion of a lot of depth into the underwater environments.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for parallax. If that didn't exist, it would make this type of process a lot harder. It is a lovely feeling having that kind of illusion of depth with 2D work, because ordinarily you could obviously never achieve that in real life. So it's in real life, you know what I mean? It's but yeah, it's a very rewarding process.
What did you think was the biggest misconception about game development? And now that you're actually making one, like how did that play into that misconception originally? Do you still have the same thoughts and feelings now that you're actually making a game?
Misconceptions being like the difficulty of making games.
Oh, like you were drawing, you were doing environment art and doing your own art, and then you're like, I want to make a game. I wonder how this would work. Like, what was your misconception going in? And now that you're in, like, do you realize like that if that was a correct conception or was it wrong?
I think it was pretty right. I definitely think that I thought that it would be a very hard process from start to finish, and it certainly has. It has not disappointed in that way. Yeah.
What's the biggest misconception over just creative types? Like as an artist, like what do you think for people on the outside looking at you, a person who draws for a living, like what's the biggest misconception that people think about artists like you?
I don't do anything all day. Like that's one of the many like misconceptions.
You draw pictures, okay, yeah.
yeah, exactly. People don't really believe what you do. Yeah, I mean, you know, in the end, it's like for me, it's a dream job, and it is a very kind of pinch yourself moment when you realize that you are doing the thing that you wanted to do your entire life. So, you know, that is very rewarding for me.
You know, it's funny, you worked in animation as an environmental artist. So like in that environment, there's a team of people, right? You have one person doing prop design, one person doing character design, one person doing story, the director doing storyboards, and then of course you doing the backdrops of whatever they need for whatever episode or film or whatever you're working on.
Yeah.
But in your case, it's all you. How much stuff have you drawn? Like how many assets have you hand drawn and scanned in or have digitally drawn and put into the game?
Oh God, good question. I've got a whole library full of assets that I've drawn. So I would say in the thousands of things, you know, in terms of like prop design and things that we're reusing. It's almost not in my nature as well, just by the way that I was trained to be reusing too much stuff. So I keep ending up doing original drawings for this, which is like, you know, it's not the ideal thing, but I definitely just innately want to be creating as original content as I can. So yeah, I'm battling with that constantly of not doing much more work.
I think it's one of the like advantages, but also disadvantages of being your own like studio and publisher is that like, you know, when you're on a deadline for a big studio, like they're gonna want you to reuse that rock you redrew, you know, 50 times. But since you're an artist and a creative and you have the option to, you're like, I'm going to redraw this. It looks similar, but I'm going to make it a completely new asset because I want to. Like it's those things. It separates yourself from big AAA game development, I think. Yeah,
it's true. Definitely. I don't think I'll ever be able to just leave something repeated. I'd always want to like work into it a bit more. It's just part of my nature.
So when does the game come out and what platforms is your studio aiming for at launch?
It comes out early next year and it's currently confirmed for PC, and obviously we'd love to be on all the consoles and everything else. We'll just have to see what happens with that later down the line.
If people want if people want to support it, and like how can they do to support your game? They can obviously wishlist it. Do you have a Twitter, Discord, main webpage they can visit?
Yeah, if they go to spiralcircusgames.com, and that's company website, but also there's a Steam link on there, and you can go to Steam and wishlist it. And also we have our Twitter is Games Circus, and we're on Instagram with Spiral Circus Games. So there's a multitude of places that you can go to support it.